And if you were always wanting to be someplace else, you're never where you really are.
Welcome to the Wordsmith Forge Christian Fiction Podcast, where we explore the hearts and minds behind faith-based storytelling. Today, we're joined by a guest who has spent a lifetime shaping words that move both heart and spirit. Chris Fabry, award-winning novelist, radio host of Chris Fabry Live, and a voice familiar to countless listeners across the country. From the hills of West Virginia to the desert landscapes of Arizona, Chris's journey has been marked by empathy, faith, and an enduring love for story. In this conversation, he opens up about his writing process, his latest novels, Saving Grayson, and the spiritual truths that anchor his work, including how God's grace meets us even in the moments we can't remember. So, settle in with your coffee, maybe your favorite hymn running through your mind, as we dive into a conversation filled with wisdom, laughter, and the kind of authenticity that only comes from a storyteller who has lived the words he writes. Here's my conversation with Chris Fabry. Audience, won't you join me welcoming Chris to the Wordsmith Forge Christian Fiction Podcast? Chris, we're very privileged to have you with us today, and if you don't mind, would you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure will. My name is Chris Fabry. I can't figure out whether I'm a radio guy who writes or a writer who does radio, because I've been doing radio since I was a kid, but I've been writing since I was a kid as well. In the hills of West Virginia, I do a daily radio program on Moody Radio called Chris Fabry Live. So it's live, and that's my name, so now you know everything. I got the bug to write when I was younger and really wanted to be published. And so from the time I published my first book in 1995 until now, it's 85, 86 books. A lot of kids' books in there. But I got married in 1982 to my wife, Andrea. We have 9 children, and they're all pretty much grown now, though there are 2 or 3 of them that are still hanging around, along with their pets. And so we live near Tucson, Arizona. So I've gone from West Virginia, Chicago, Colorado, all the way to Arizona. We're either going to Mexico or out into the Pacific, I think. I'm not sure which.
Yeah. Well, I had several things I was going to come back with as you were talking. One reason I'm very comfortable having you on the podcast is because I know now that you're a man that understands empathy. I listened to your radio program from the 21st. You had, who'd you have on there? It was Bill and Christy. Yeah, very, very good program. I like to think about conflict as nothing more than unrealized expectations.
That's good.
So, well, that comes from my career as a hostile work environment mediator. And, you can have empathy for those people too. Most of it is, boy, I'm glad it's you and not me.
Well, there's probably a few novels in there too, because that's where I always think of a story as like, what is the main conflict here? What is the thing that's going to drag that reader into it? And especially, in marriage, you have these 2 competing desires or that can happen there, and that conflict will take you either deeper or separate you. And so I'm glad you heard that program. That was a fun one. I also co-host a program with Dr. Gary Chapman, The 5 Love Languages, and he had them on his program. And as I was listening to it, Bill, the husband, said, I was terrible at empathy before we got married. Yeah. And then my wife helped me with that. I thought, well, let's do a whole program just on men and empathy. How do you cultivate that and move into that? So that was the impetus for that program.
It was a good one. It really was. So you're close to Mount Lemmon?
Yeah, Mount Lemmon is not far. As a matter of fact, we lived in Colorado, and so now if we really want to feel what it feels like back in Colorado, we just drive up to Mount Lemmon and see if it's snow there or the evergreens.
Yeah, it's Coronado National Forest is a great place. So one of my questions I always ask is there some place close to where you live where you kind of go to get away from it all, lay your burdens down, and maybe talk to God, or maybe just recharge yourself?
Yes. That I do go for walks around the neighborhood behind us, and there's places where you can go out into the desert, and you got to watch your step, because of the rattlesnakes that are out there.
Yeah, scorpions and
scorpions too. Yeah, we saw a big one the other day, and we have this company that comes over and sprays. They haven't done it yet, and so you can see rather large ones. But I'll be honest with you, the place where I go to recharge, and this is my favorite place on the planet, is right here. I've got this L-shaped desk, and I've got my devotional stuff over here. So I come in, and every day I'll start with just jotting down. I've got a 5-year journal that my daughter gave me. And so I'll start with, here's what happened today. And I'm able to look back at last year on this same date. Here's what I was going through. So I do that, and I go through, there's a psalm, a psalter that I have that I read through, and I go to Proverbs, and then wherever else I'm reading in the scripture, and just spend, the first waking moments. I also have a pour over coffee maker here. You've got to have your coffee. So I get in with a little bit of caffeine and Jesus, and just cultivate that. So every day, and it's like if I don't do that, it just doesn't feel like I've really started my day. And so this is the place where I come every day to kind of recharge.
Yeah, I was waiting for that joke about coffee and Hebrews, but
Hebrews, yes, I get it.
Perhaps because you're on the radio all the time, and people probably know a lot about you already if they've listened to that, but I wonder, do they know what 3 of your favorite songs are?
3 of my favorite songs. They probably, if they've listened to my program any amount of time, they know that I am very much, I gravitate toward the hymns, because as a kid I didn't, these dusty old things. Yeah. But the older I get and the more worship choruses we sing, the more I gravitate back toward the old hymns. And I was going through, the other thing I have back here is 2 hymnals. And Can It Be, the Wesley hymn, And Can It Be That I Should Gain. Now, how many songs do you know that begin with the word and? And can it be that I should gain an interest in the Savior's blood? Died he for me, who caused his pain, for me whom death pursued. I won't go through the whole thing. Amazing love, how can it be that thou, my God, shouldst die for me? So I love that. I love the depth. I love the theology. And some of the hymns that are around don't have that good of theology. We won't talk about those, but the really solid ones that have come down to us, that have been sung by my parents and your parents as well, all the way back, for hundreds of years, have such great theology in them. Even the Christmas carols that we sing have great theology. But I also grew up in the 70s, and I listened to the singers, songwriters. I was listening to the Eagles, and Styx was big when I was in high school. But the one person that I listened to the most was Jackson Browne. And so there are several songs of his that are running on empty. How many of us aren't running on empty these days?
Exactly.
But there's one line in one song of his that says, I always feel I'm just a day away from where I want to be. I'm just one exit away. I want to be here. I want to be at this, I want to be at the outcome. I want to be at the destination. And if you were always wanting to be someplace else, you're never where you really are. So there are a lot of things that in cultural, the songs that I grew up with in the 70s with James Taylor. Bruce Hornsby, I love the way it is. That's just the way it is. I love his music as well. So there's a little bit of hymns and Jackson Browne and Bruce Hornsby.
Yeah, I'm always amazed at how much theology the old hymns can pack into a few words, and they resonate with you forever. This is my story. This is my song. Well, let's try that again. How about your 3 favorite movies?
Okay. I have to say, because this has a very formative thing in my literary career, my writing, as well as a child. I can remember To Kill a Mockingbird coming on, I think it was NBC, because we only got 2 stations there in the Hollow in West Virginia. We got NBC and CBS. And so To Kill a Mockingbird came on, and I remember watching that as a young child. I was probably 4 or 5, 6 maybe, and I didn't understand the word to kill a mockingbird. I thought it was tequila mockingbird for a long time. And then when I was in junior high school, I think it was 7th or 8th grade, and I asked the teacher, "Hey, I'd like to do reading over the summer. I really want to, what book should I read?" And she had a mimeographed list, and she looked at one and she pointed To Kill a Mockingbird, and she said, "I think you're ready for this." And so I checked it out of the library that summer, and that summer something happened inside of me, and the Horton Foote film script was so faithful to that, with Tom Robinson and Atticus and Jim and Scout and Dill. So that's a long answer. So I would say To Kill a Mockingbird is one of my favorites. I love, and I always cry at that movie. There are places in that film and I always cry. So movies that touch a place on the inside. The other movie that I do that to is Hoosiers. Gene Hackman and the basketball movie in the Indiana, based on a real story, Hoosiers. And the older I get, the more I like Westerns. And I'm not sure why. I think maybe because there is a good guy, bad guy. There's the evil and the good that are right there. There's the Jackson Browne lyric coming up. But there's this delineation of, these are the good guys and these are the bad guys, and they don't blur. So one of the films that I've watched in the last few years has been the Kevin Costner movie, Open Range. That's what it is. It's Open Range. We've got these signs where I am, because we have cattle that just kind of wander around here in Arizona, and it's an open range, so you have to be careful, how fast you're driving. But there's 3 of them, and I could name more next time.
Well, if you know James L. Rubart, he was the first author I interviewed, and I just have so much respect for him. He came on this podcast when I had 0 subscribers and 0 viewers.
Wow.
Why would you do that? I mean, your time's valuable. So anyway, he told me that you tell me your 3 favorite movies, and I can tell you the theme of your life.
Really?
Yeah.
So I wonder what that says if I just said Open Range, Hoosiers, and To Kill a Mockingbird.
Well, I take 3 favorite movies, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this, but I take people's 3 favorite songs, 3 favorite movies, and I pass them on to a good friend of mine. His name is Chat GPT. And I say, "Chat, what do you think the theme of their life is?" And they come back with some stuff. I just did my doctor the other day. He was trying to interview me, and I was interviewing him. What are your 3 favorite movies? And so, and it was interesting because he's Indian. But they came out very interesting.
You know what I think? I see this in my writing and the stories that I will choose to write about. One is the underdog, because Hoosiers with this
Yeah.
tiny little school, they didn't even hardly have enough to field a team. The other is injustice. Both in To Kill a Mockingbird and Open Range, there's a real sense of injustice about what is going on and wanting things to be right, wanting to be able to lift up those who are being downtrodden. Whether it's Tom Robinson in that case, if people were lying about him, or in Open Range, they were free grazers that are going through. So I wonder if there's not something to that.
I believe it's probably right. Some on the surface, you're not digging very deep when you're doing something like that. I will mention that my wife and I are both Hoosiers, and I played basketball in places like Lagodi and Olytic, and well, we didn't play at Olytic, but I lived 20 miles from Olytic. So yeah, Hoosiers has always been special for us, and along with Bobby Knight, and
of course
things like that.
And throwing the chair across the floor.
Yeah. So, Chris, if you don't mind, would you just tell us a little bit about your walk with Christ?
I grew up in a Christian home, meaning we went to church and we played gospel songs on the radio and that kind of thing. But my parents were kind of caught in this performance faith.
Yeah.
You were up one day and down the next, and you didn't really know, am I in or am I out? And they started listening to Back to the Bible. And at the time, Theodore Epp was there. And this was not a Christian station. It was a secular radio station. But they started hearing the truth of the gospel. And they had friends. My mother had a friend named Mildred. And I can still remember, because we only had one phone in the house, it hung on the wall. And you picked it up. And if you couldn't go any further than the cord would allow you. But, Catherine, this is, it's by grace you're saved, through faith, not of yourselves, gift of God. And so very early on, I heard that message. And it was probably 10 or 11 years old that I still remember, wait a minute, after the 5,000th time saying, oh, God save me, I realized, wait a minute, this is not something that you're offering me that I perform for. This is something that you are giving me as a gift, and I need to accept it, receive it, and then live it out and let you change me from the inside out. So I'd say at 10 or 11, I got that. But then it wasn't until I got into my teen years that I really thought, wait a minute, if this is true then, if Jesus is who he says he is, and the Bible says and I'm in Christ, then he deserves more than just Sundays and Wednesday nights. And I started that trail of then, okay, what does it mean to follow Christ? And so my wife and I were married in 1982, went to Moody Bible Institute to study, and we thought we would go from there, to the mission field or do whatever. And it didn't happen. I went back into media, went into radio. And I have deepened my walk through all of that time, with all of the ups and downs, the vicissitudes, having 9 kids and being married for 40 plus years, there's a lot that you go through that God will bring you through and through. And that's what really has sustained me all these years.
Yeah, it is a hard concept for many people. And I think the longer I live, I understand why Billy Graham said he came to save Christians. Because people that are, just Christian through and through, sometimes just still feel like they have to work for it.
Bingo.
And you will work, but not because you have to, because you love the Lord. And what else could you do? Yeah. When I wrote my first book, I didn't know there was Christian fiction. But it's a Christian fiction book, because what else could I write?
Right.
It's kind of that simple. Well, you've kind of already explained what might have sparked your calling to write Christian fiction. You could have written Christian nonfiction,
True.
but you have certainly put a lot of ink on the page, 80-some books. Now, are all of those fiction, or is it a combination?
Most of them are fiction. I've done some as told to biographies. I wrote a book with Jim Tressel, who at the time was with coach for Ohio State. And then a couple of years after that, the Saints won the Super Bowl, and Drew Brees needed a writer, and he called up Drew was at Purdue, and he called up this Ohio State coach and said, "Hey, this Fabry guy, you think he'd do anything good?"
Can he write?
Yeah, and he suggested, yeah, go ahead, give him a chance. So we did Coming Back Stronger together. I've written with Dr. Gary Chapman. I've written some nonfiction with him, but most of the books that I have done are fiction, because fiction is what sparked me. Fiction is what sparks me now.
Yeah.
You know, when I read a story and get lost in a story, that's what I see. I like to put it that fiction will come around the back door of your heart and knock, whereas nonfiction is just kind of propositional truth. It's right there. A lot of people respond to that. For me, it's what Nathan the prophet did to David. You know, he was a shepherd at heart. He told this story about the little lamb and the traveler and the meal that he ate.
The rich man's sheep.
Bingo. And David was incensed. And that gave Nathan the ability to say, "You're the man," you know, with the story. He did it with the story. So that's what I try to do with each of my stories, is to have something that will come around the back door of your heart and knock, and hopefully it'll be a good thing that happens inside.
Yeah, definitely. I like to say that Jesus was the first Christian fiction author, even before there was a Christian.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Stories. He was a storyteller.
He was. And it impressed people, incensed some people. They were very upset with him at times, of course. Well, I'm not used to interviewing someone that has so many books. So my next question, as I look at my teleprompter, which biblical truth or passage anchors the book we're discussing today? So perhaps we can narrow that down to the most recent book.
I'll pull it up here. Saving Grace is one that I wrote it a little bit differently than other books, because it was the publisher came and said, "We're going to do issues. Is there an issue that you would like to write about that you haven't written about?" And I said, the story that has been rolling around my soul is about Alzheimer's dementia. Oh. And the main character in this book, Grayson Hayes, is dealing with early onset Alzheimer's. And so I wanted to write not only the story from his perspective, but also look at all the people around him who are trying to love him well and move into his life and to do it. And he's kind of hard to love, because he's, doesn't remember some things, and he's kind of crusty and all of this. But the one idea that I had was the question, can God forgive the sins I can't remember? And does God have the power to forgive me when I can't do anything for somebody else? And Grayson has made some big mistakes in his life. And the idea, the thread of the book is he's going back to make it good. You know, he's going back to tie up all these loose ends. But he can't do it because he can't remember all of them. So does grace fill in the places of those things that he can't ask forgiveness for? That was part of the impetus for writing that story.
Yeah, and more, I think people are aware of everyone that's suffering from Alzheimer's, even just mildly affected or deeply affected, and it's such a insidious disease. They call it the long goodbye, something like that.
Yeah.
Very sad.
Yeah. And so the tension that I had was, okay, who's going to want to read a story about somebody going through Alzheimer's? That's a hard sell to people.
It is.
But the ones who have read it, I'll say it that way. The ones who have read it have said this was such a life-giving story. As a matter of fact, I got an email. I want to read this to you.
Sure.
Because this is kind of representative of the people who got a kick out of it. A lot of the things in my stories, there'll be a lot of humor in there. But she said, I walked quickly through the library last Saturday as I had left my mom in the car alone. She has some dementia and can't be left alone for long. Despite talking all week about going to the library, she suddenly seemed exhausted, wanted to wait in the car. I returned my books from the previous Saturday, ran through the aisles grabbing some random books for the following week, not sure why I grabbed the book that with nondescript spine showing the title, Saving Grayson, but now I know why. These past weeks have been a spell of hard ones, and my prayers for strength have seemed to simply float into the air with no refreshment returning. I just finished Saving Grayson and can't describe the comfort your story has brought to me. I'm reminded that good memories can still be made and that helping those we love on their journey is a privilege. Thanks for sharing this gift of this story and for the comfort it will bring to many who, as we navigate this unfamiliar road, which you just said, is the long goodbye. And then she said, my prayers were heard. And so if my story can be the answer to one person's prayer, to give them a little bit of hope, a little bit of, you're doing something really good here. Even though you don't get the payback of the person that forget what you do for them, this is worth it. Keep going.
Yeah. And I'm sure your book makes people realize, boy, I'm not alone in this.
Bingo.
Other people are struggling, doing the best they can, trying to keep their patients, their upsettedness under rein. It's very difficult. My next question is, many of our listeners are looking for books that reach boys, men's, entire families. How does your book connect with that audience? You just expressed a good example.
Yeah. Well, and that was a female writer, and the program we did on empathy, it's easier for women to have empathy, I think, on the whole, than men. It's not that men can't. Yeah. It's just, different wiring and all that. So when I think of men and boys, I think of, what I read, Hardy Boys. I've got some old Hardy Boys up there behind me. And those, the adventure tales and the storms and all of that kind of thing. But I try not to write with the audience in mind, in the sense that, okay, I'm going to write this for a man to read this, and a man's got to read that. I want to let the story do the work. And I want to tell it as well as I possibly can so that no matter who reads it, they're going to get something from it. It's going to draw them in. But I will say that I did a series with Jerry Jenkins a few years ago, and it was, I think, 15 books. We did 15 books in the Red Rock Mystery Series. And so we had two characters, a male and a female, twins, who were going through solving these mysteries. And our hope was that the male would be the Hardy Boys and the female would be Nancy Drew, so that the boys and the girls would want to read this. Yeah. And so what you get is you get the personality of the girl, and all of the girls' chapters are longer, and she has more friendships. She talks more about, what's going on in her life, and she has these emotions and feelings. The boys' chapters are usually really short. This happened, man, that made me mad, and then, that kind of thing. So the kids really picked up on that, and as they were reading, it was like, I feel some of the same things that Bryce feels, and I feel the things that Ashley, but it gives the boy a little look into the girls' chapters, and vice versa. So that was one time when we did something strategic to try to pull boys and girls into the same story.
I have 2 books, and of course, trying to sell them. Marketing is seldom an author's forte. But I thought I should be on a podcast. That'll help. So I went looking for an appropriate podcast, and what I found was female hosts talking about romance, interviewing female authors that write romance. And I thought, okay, that's not going to work. Then on some Christian fiction internet pages, I read where women were asking for book recommendations where romance wasn't the central theme. Other women were saying, can you recommend a book that my husband might be able to connect with? And then the one that got me was a woman that said, I'd like recommendations for my son who has no male contact, no father, no uncles, no brothers, but biblical principles, a book with biblical principles written by a male. And since that was me as a kid, I thought, I'm going to start a podcast. So far, I've skated, let's see, you're probably the 44th author I've interviewed, and no one has said, hey, you're not interviewing any women.
That's fantastic.
And that's why I would really like to see Christian fiction written by men elevated up.
Yes.
Women are fantastic authors. I don't argue about that. They're great. But I'm kind of working on that male side of things.
Yes.
And the other thing that concerns me, and boy, this would be a good topic for your radio program perhaps, is what's popular today in Christian fiction mostly is women's romance. And so my concern is you have a woman reading her romance book, and her 12-year-old daughter picks it up and reads it and thinks, it's going to be so nice when my Prince Charming comes along. Meanwhile, 12-year-old Prince Charming is sitting in the corner of his bedroom in the dark looking at porn on the internet. And he thinks, now I know what women like. And so when the two get together, we have unrealized expectations, which is, as we talked about, is conflict.
Yes, exactly.
So that's my concern is it is a romance book, and there's Christian principles involved, but are they age appropriate? And anyway, a good discussion
on what you're saying, and I have some of the same struggles or the same hopes. You know, I just hosted the Christie Awards. I've been doing that for the last 5 years, and I think there were, other than me as the host and then Jeff, everybody else was female, but I think 2 authors were nominated out of all 9 categories, and there were at least 3, so there were probably 30-some people there. There were 2 men that were nominated, and I thought, is that because men can't write well, or their books aren't, being seen, or is there more going on here? And I think that especially the romance, I don't read a whole lot of Christian romance, I'll be honest with you. But the ones that I read now are more complex than they used to be. It's not the cookie cutter, boy meets girl, they have a conflict, he says something, it is formulaic, There's a lot of, especially historical romance, there's a lot of this intrigue and a lot of inner conflict as well as the outer conflict. Because that's the thing. It's pretty easy to find a nemesis. You can find a villain anywhere. Right. But what about the inner conflict that you show the character going through? That's what the reader really will be gravitated toward, and will take them deeper into their own heart. So I don't want to throw, all Christian romance out the
Right.
door, the baby out with the bathwater. I don't think you do either.
No.
But I want it to be quality stuff that will hit deeply in the heart.
Yeah. And so I don't know how successful the podcast will be in that mission, but if you don't try, you know the outcome.
Good for you.
Yeah, you miss all the shots you don't take,
That's right.
that kind of deal. So, how do you hope your book sharpens the faith of the reader?
Well, I've always felt that a good book reads you. You don't read it.
No.
It reads you. So, in the case of Saving Grayson, my hope is that the reader will see themselves in Grayson, in the struggles that he has, forgiveness and working toward that, because it's all about him. He's got to be in control. He's got to do this thing on his own. But then to see it in his wife, Lottie, and in his brother when he goes back to the little town in West Virginia and he sees his brother there and the conflict that he has with his brother, with the people in town who know him too well, and he doesn't remember what he's done back there. So my hope is that it will sharpen the faith of the person who says, I can't face that. I can't go there. I can't live through that. I can't have that hard conversation, for example. That it will maybe give them a little more courage to be who they are rather than who they thought they were supposed to be. And that's a tall order for any story to be able to accomplish something like that.
It is. You made me think, I don't know whether this is exactly applicable, but when I was growing up in a small town there in southern Indiana, I thought everybody knew everything about me. And I didn't have a very high opinion of myself. And if I had stayed there, that low opinion of myself would have caused me to never stepped out and do anything different but get a job in Bloomington and put televisions together at RCA, which was my goal as a high school student. My counselor said, "Well, Mike, what are you going to do when you graduate?" I said, "Well, I'm going to get a job at RCA and buy a new car." He said, "That sounds about right for you." I said, "Thank you." But God had other plans, and I'm glad He did.
Okay, you know what that reminds me of? You mentioned Bloomington. That reminds me of my fourth movie that I'm going to mention, and that is Breaking Away. Did you ever see Breaking Away?
No, I haven't.
Okay, it was, I think it was in the early 80s, and it was about this kid, this young teenage boy who rides a bike, and he really wants to be with the Italians. He wants to ride like the Italians do, and he gets in this bike race. Okay, Dennis Quaid was in it. There were several people who were just breaking in. But breaking away, and there's that other thing, the underdog and the injustice and all of that. So I think I'm telling more than I need to.
Gee, that gets you down below the surface a little. You're below the epidermal here when we have 4 movies to analyze the theme of your life. But as you're writing books, have there been occasions when you think, okay, I'm going to write this, the 1,000 words today is going to go this way, and my protagonist or antagonist is going to go from A to B, and you're riding along happy as a lark, and all of a sudden the character makes a left turn without any turn signals.
Yes.
And you have to write to follow where he's going because you don't know.
Yes. Yeah, because I I'm not a huge plodding along and this is going to be what I write this day, and this is going to be what, I have a concept of the beginning of the book and the ending of the book and where the middle is going, but I don't have with specificity. So that means that I get to be creative. I get to play around in the pasture of the story. And I can remember one story, Under a Cloudless Sky, and I wrote this mainly as an homage to my mother, who grew up in a little coal town in West Virginia. And my dad grew up, his dad was a coal miner as well. And I wanted to do something that kind of elevated their lives a little bit. And so I had this husband and wife who lived on the mountain, and they were about to have all of the land that they owned and all of their family buried back up on the hill. So it means that land meant so much to them. I wanted to have this conversation between the husband and the wife and let it be organic.
Yeah.
But let some of that conflict come out of him, that she didn't know how much he cared about all that, was planted there on the hillside, and let that come out that she would really like to move and have him show his love to her by, going someplace else. And so I sat down, and that day was just the most glorious conversation, because it just came alive to me. I could see the woman. I could see her as Sissy Spacek. I think a lot of, I get characters in my mind of what they look like. Is this Kevin Costner here? Is that Sissy Spacek? And I had Sissy Spacek as older, and she was going through this thing. And I got to the end of that, and I walked downstairs from my office here, and I said to my wife, I don't think I can write better dialogue than I just did between Hollis and his wife.
Yeah.
It just kind of poured out and went a couple of different directions than I thought it was going to go. But that's what happens when you're in the fictive dream, as someone says. When you're in that, then it can go wherever it needs to go, and you just follow it. But most days, I'll be honest with you, most days are not like that. Most days are not magic. You don't come up with just the right dialogue. Most of the time, my best writing is in my editing. When I go back to it and I think, no, that's not right here. I need to move this around. I need to change this a little bit. And editing is as much good writing as those days when it all kind of flows. So I've learned the hard lesson: show up, put your rear end down in the chair, or stand up if you have a standing desk. But put your rear end there, show up every day, something good's going to happen.
Yeah, it's going to. Yeah. Do you feel like there's been times when God's taught you a lesson as you're riding along? And you say, oh, thank you, God. I could use that.
Yeah, I think that, even with Grayson, especially with I wrote a novel, Junebug. I got visual aids here for you. Wrote a novel called Junebug in 2008, and it came out in 2009 or 2010. And this is about a little girl who rides around in an RV with her dad all over the country. And one day she walks into a Walmart and she looks up on the missing children posters and she sees herself. So that's the first page of the book, written by, from the perspective of the 9-year-old.
What a hook.
Exactly. So, the rest of the book is just discovery. Who am I? Who is he? Why am I here? Where my family, and all of that. But that summer that I was writing that, and then into the fall, we had a situation in our house where there was toxic mold, black mold that was found in 2 different bad shower installs. And this was a house it was 5,500 square feet. It was going to be the house that we died in,
Yeah.
It's just this glorious we thought a mansion like the Beverly Hillbillies with the cement. We didn't have a cement pond. But
You did? Oh.
we had other. There's a space for our kids to roam around, to spread out. And so what happened was we had to vacate that house. We basically got out of there with the clothes on our backs, and a friend of mine loaned me his pull-along camper to do my radio show out of. So I was doing my radio show out of this pull-along trailer in front of that house, and we were down the road a piece, renting another house. So as I'm writing this, I'm living it. I'm feeling the same thing that Junebug feels, when she is there. And throughout that story, and as I'm writing it, I'm realizing you're not doing this alone. There's more going on here than you can understand. Your provision is not in what you can do. I'm going to be providing for you. I'm walking alongside of you. And I got to the end of that book and the end of the writing of that, and in the editing process, and just I don't weep a lot with my writing, but at the end of that book, I just wept uncontrollably because of, not that everything was tied up in a bow and all of the things that had come together, but I wept because of that, what you just said, that God was showing me, I'm with you here.
Yeah.
I'm going through this with you. You can trust me. Put your trust in me, not in yourself, not in what you can control.
Yeah. You just now mentioned that you related to Junebug, and that was one of my questions. Characters you relate to. When you write, do you see yourself in the work that you do?
Yes, I do. And there have been so many different stories that I've written. There's one where I write characters that you don't like, and Grayson is kind of that way. He's crusty. There's another story that I wrote called Not in the Heart, and I made the main character a man who's kind of estranged from his family. He still loves his family, but he's a journalist, he's a workaholic, and he's a gambler. He loves to gamble. It's just that gets that feeling of gambling. And I've never done, other than watching a horse race on TV, I've never done any gambling. So I had to do a lot of research and ask people, what goes on here? Why do you keep going, after you lose all this, why do you keep going back to that? And to put yourself in the shoes of that person who is trying to write this story, trying to solve this mystery of, there's a fellow who's going to be executed that night, and if he doesn't find the answer to who actually did this, then that's going to happen. So and then his son, it needs a heart transplant. It is like it's all of this stuff that's going on. But I really resonated with that character because of the tension on the inside of wanting. It's like Romans 7. It's like, here's what I want to do and I'm not doing it, and there's what I ought to do and I'm not doing that. The thing the evil that I don't do and the good that I want to do. Oh, wretched man that I am. That was that character, and I think we all, I like to say that as a Christian, I'm a bigger sinner now than I was when I first came to Christ.
The value of the law.
Yeah, I see his holiness and against my sin. Yeah. And it's like I'm totally undone here, and I need his grace every day. So that was the character that I really identified a lot with his struggle on the inside. If
you could go back and give the younger you some advice, what would that be?
That was the easiest question you've asked. Because I think about this a lot, Mike. For so long, so Jerry Jenkins is the one who kind of gave me the permission to write. Because Jerry was working at Moody Bible Institute, and I would have him on my radio program anytime he had a book come out, which was like every 2 weeks. And Jerry knew that I wanted to write, and he said, I can help you with that if you like, but it's going to be painful. I said, bring out the pain. And so he showed me what he saw when he looked at a manuscript. And it took me a long, long time. It was part of writing children's books. I would send him, 35,000 words, and they'd come back at 15,000. It's like, what? You can't do that. You can't cut all that.
That's good stuff.
He showed me what he saw. And so here was my idea. And at the time, Jerry had written, 100 books. Now he's up over 200. I thought, if I sit down here and I write as many novels as I can, at some point one of them's going to be a bestseller. He had written a lot of books and then Left Behind hit, and millions. If I write enough, I'm going to get a bestseller, and then I can, coast. I can do what I want to do or write what I want to write after that. And that hasn't happened. Even after 85 stories, and I've written with the Kendrick brothers, the movies that they've done, I've novelized their movies and all of these. It's like, no, that success that I was looking for, that unmet expectation that you were talking about, there's the conflict. Why haven't I been able to do that? And what I've come to is God cares too much about me to give me what I think I need. And what I think I want, and he wants to give me what I really need. And that is to not focus on the outcome of every story. What I thought about Saving Grayson, Kevin Costner was going to play Grayson in the movie. Jennifer Connelly was going to be his wife. This is going to be a major motion picture, and et cetera, et cetera. That's what I had in my head, and that's how I wrote it. And I loved writing that. But it didn't become that. It didn't become a bestseller. And what I would tell my younger self is, don't write for the outcome. Don't put your face toward the outcome and measure your life by that. Let the process do what it will do in your heart and in your life. Be faithful to show up every day. If I had looked at the process, if I had looked at the outcome only, I would have missed that email from the woman who said, I'm in the library parking lot with my mom, I wouldn't have written that story. I would have written another that was formulaic, that was romance, that was, whatever. And I would have missed Grayson.
Yeah.
No, stay with the stories that bubble up, in your heart and your soul. Stay with those. Write them as well as you possibly can. Write hard and clear about what hurts. And let the outcome be what it will be, rather than forcing it to be something, a bestseller. And I still hope I have a bestseller one of these days, Mike, and I hope you do too.
Well,
that's not the goal. That can't be the goal. The goal has to be the process.
I like to say that anyone can be an author. Just put some words together, get a cover, go through KDP, you're published. If you have that with your name on it, you're an author.
Yep.
Being a writer is something else. Being able to write is way, way far above being an author.
Truman Capote had something to say about that, because somebody gave him Jack Kerouac's On the Road, and it was like one continuous sentence and all, traveling all over the place. And Capote looked at it and said, "That's not writing, that's typing."
Exactly. Same premise, I believe.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, gee, time is slipping away here. This has really been an interesting conversation that I could carry on and on. So where can folks find your books and connect with you? How do you want to engage with your readers so you can get those really nice emails?
There you go. Yeah. Well, my website is just chrisfabry.com, and you can see the books there. If you want to listen to the radio show, it's chrisfabrylive.org. And then, you get online, but the books are online at wherever you buy books. But something happened during that Christie Award. The organizers gave those who kind of advertised and gave money to help us do that, put that on, one group to, they could do whatever they want. And they said, here's what we want to do. We want to get people to go to their local bookstore, the Christian bookstore or their local bookstore, if you still have one in your town.
Yeah.
And so that's what I've been encouraging people to do is if you can find a brick and mortar store, to go in there. Yeah, you're probably going to pay, a couple of dollars more, but it'll be so encouraging to buy from that local store that if it's a Christian bookstore, it's not just a bookstore. It's a ministry. It's an outreach.
Yeah.
There are people who will go in there and who will, read fiction or nonfiction or pick up a Bible or a commentary or a Bible study or something like that. That's why the people still run those stores. So if you have one of those in your neighborhood, in your town, or if you have to drive for a half hour or 45 minutes to go there, do that and see what kind of encouragement you can be to those store owners or the people who work there.
Yeah. Great. Is there a universal message, all inspiring, that you would like to give to our audience?
Well, I would say, let me talk to the person who wants to write, because I find that writers are gravitating toward these kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
If that's you, if you feel like, I've got something in here that I want to say, but I don't know if it's any good or if anybody will read it, put aside that whole thing of, is it any good? Will anybody read it? Is it worth my time? Because the process is what you're in for. I guarantee you, even if your book is not published, the process that you go toward in mining your own heart will be worth it, because you will see yourself on the page. You will learn things about yourself that you will not learn in any other way than to write a story or to write nonfiction or even to journal. There are things that I learn about myself when I journal that I had no idea looking back, a year or two or 10 years down the road. So let the process do the work inside of you with your writing.
Excellent. Can we close with a word of prayer?
Sure thing. Do you want to pray or you want me to?
Well, I generally do, and I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to, how is this going to be? I would be happy to unload that, and I'll let you struggle through that.
I'd love to, Mike. Thank you.
Great. I appreciate it.
Father, we've talked a lot about your grace and your mercy in this hour and stories and the way that they intersect with our own hearts. We're just filled with gratitude for your kindness, your generosity,
Yes,
your empathy for us, to move out of heaven, to pay the ultimate price so that we could have that relationship with you. We couldn't do it any other way. And so our hearts are overflowing with gratitude for that kind of grace and mercy, that you would become sin for us and die for us, and not only go into a tomb, but then rise again to new life so that we could have that eternal life with you. So I pray for Mike and for me, for the stories that we've written that are running around our souls still, that you would use them in somebody's life. Encourage somebody who's watching this right now who is wanting to write, has always wanted to write, feels like they have a story inside but don't know how to get that out. Give them encouragement for the process in doing that, and unleash their words on the world like you unleashed your word to us, the Word made flesh. We give you thanks and praise. Thank you for this time. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Chris.
God bless you, Mike.
I really do appreciate you coming on the show. My old man voice is really kicking in here. That gets worse as time goes on. But I know our audience is going to enjoy this episode. It's been great. So have a pleasant afternoon, and may God's grace continue to spread generously over you and your work and your mission. So thank you.
It's a real honor to get to talk with you today. God bless you,
Oh,
friend.
thank you. Goodbye. What a joy to have Chris Fabry with us on the Wordsmith Forge. His stories remind us that fiction doesn't just entertain, it reads us. From Saving Grayson's honest look at memory and mercy to his reflections on faith, calling, and the writing life, Chris reminds us that every story is a chance to rediscover grace. You can find his books at chrisfabry.com and listen to his daily radio show at chrisfabrylive.org. Better yet, visit your local Christian bookstore and pick up one of his novels there. Support the ministries that help stories like his reach readers everywhere. If this conversation encouraged you, please share it, leave a review, or subscribe wherever you listen. Until next time, keep reading clean, your heart humble, and remember, the stories we tell can change the world when they're forged in faith. This is Mike Baines, out.